Do you ever wonder why it seems like more and more people are committing suicide? Like the later and later we get in time, just kind of more people do it compared with maybe when you were younger or historically a long time ago. Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're talking about why suicide is getting more and more popular or why more and more people are doing it. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy? Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I don't know, I know that I think the numbers have it seems that they've gone up. We just looked it up and they said the peak was 2022, right? With like 50,000 people in
Well,
the
it said it
US.
hasn't peaked yet, which to me
And
means it just keeps going up.
right, which is also a weird way to phrase that, right? Except it's like
Yeah.
we're slightly below the peak year of 2022. It seems like 2024 is the last year reported. That was very close. I think it was like 800 off. But yeah, it's interesting because I always wonder with these things too, you know, there's more people in the world now than there were before. So I always wonder if it's like a combination of, well, there's just more people and we're more informed about goings-ons because we track more data. Computers and stuff make it easier for us to keep these records and stuff over time, make comparisons, do statistics. So I've always wondered how much is like, oh yeah, this stuff's actually changing versus like, no, it's just that there's more people and we
Hmm.
hear about it. Do you know what I mean? Does that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely sometimes think that, but that's maybe a possibility. I also think there's a lot of other causative factors
Oh
for it.
yeah. I
Like
mean, I think there's a
when
lot right now too, for sure.
Yes. And like some of these statistics and stuff are just shocking. Like I was listening to something that farmers are like one of the highest rates of suicides ever. You would never think that because you're like they're working outside doing whatever, but like turns out that farmers have a very high rate of suicide, which is kind of surprising.
I think apparently that's because a lot of that's very hard.
Hmm.
Like owning the
Yeah,
farm
and
and
they get
day-to-day
screwed by
managing
like
it.
the big
Yeah,
companies and
they
stuff
get
like
screwed
that.
over by these big
And
companies.
they're hugely in debt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember. Well, they are because just starting a farm, you think about the equipment and stuff costs. It's insane. Plus
Hmm.
land and all. Yeah, I remember Monsanto, that company that genetically engineered
Oh
the
yeah, the one
soybeans
that
and
screws
stuff.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. They had like
They were
pursued
bought by
law.
Bayer.
Yep.
Go
Yes, they
figure.
were. Yeah. I couldn't remember the name of the company. You just reminded me. I was
Yeah.
thinking about that the other day, so I don't know why. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, they had there was plenty of cases where they would like aggressively pursue these lawsuits and ruin people, and then they would, end up
Well,
committing
dude, for
suicide. So
no ethically right reason, because they make a
no.
genetically modified seed that they can patent, and then if their seed gets on your
Oh,
land,
blows on
they
your land.
want a
Yeah, it
court,
would
yeah,
blow
they want
over.
a
And
court case where
mhm.
you have to give them your profits or do whatever,
Well, there
which
was
is the
even
most effed up stuff
oh
ever,
dude,
which just goes
so
to show you that the whole legal system is a crock of
so
you
effed
know
up.
what.
And Monsanto, they actually found documents too, 'cause I remember teaching this for ethics. Like they had, I mean, they were a huge company. They had tons of money. So they had a huge law firm. Now imagine you're
Hmm.
independent farmer. You don't
Yeah,
have money for
you have
this.
no money.
So
Yeah.
even if you have a solid case that you could win, they would just drag you
Hmm.
through the courts until you basically were so broke that you just couldn't do it anymore.
Yep.
And I think that's the other side of our legal system that's a mess too, is that if you have money, you can just drag this crap on forever
Yeah.
until you
Hmm.
basically break the other person. So you win
Hmm.
by, essentially having more cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be interesting if you were the person who invoked the lawsuit, you had to pay for both sides unless you won. So if you lost, you'd have to pay for both sides.
I think they
But
do
if you won,
sometimes,
yeah,
but
who knows?
also in this
Yeah,
case too, they win by default by just dragging
yeah,
it
because
on
they
because the
just pay
person's
people
forced
off.
to pull. Yeah.
But anyways, we're completely off topic
I know.
already.
Well, we're
Because I
kind of
think
on
one of the
topic.
reasons, I think one, I was thinking about this because it's one of those things where it does seem like it's getting to be a bigger and bigger thing. Like sometimes I just feel like everybody just feels down because you have ups and downs in life, and sometimes
Well,
you just feel down.
we
And
both
I was
know people that
noticing,
committed suicide too,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
definitely.
like very common, I think, for people to know people that have done it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a
And like
shame.
I noticed recently, it's hard for me to even say something bad, like I'm feeling down on ChatGPT without it saying, well, you should really consider talking. Like, and it's just like, no, I'm just having like a bad day. I feel shitty.
Well,
And yeah.
no, I think you're making a good point, which is like, I think that's one of our problems is like we have this perception that if we're not manic all the time, there's something severely wrong with us. Like if we're not happy, engaged, ready to go all the time. But think
Living
about it.
our best life.
Yeah. And like but we all work a lot. People have to
Yeah.
work a ton to afford anything now. So it's like, how can you keep that up all the time? and not have bad days and not have things happen. It doesn't mean you're depressed. But then, like you said, everywhere you see though, it's always like, well, did you know there's this number to call, blah, 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 which is good. Don't get me wrong, but it
Hmm.
also puts these thoughts in people's heads too, in a way, which is weird.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have two thoughts on this topic of why suicide is
Okay.
occurring more than ever before. So thought number one is actually because the bar or the barrier to entry to life is so much lower than it used to be. Like if you look back 100, 200, or even more years than that, survival was not guaranteed. Like as a matter of fact, if you
No.
made it past childhood, you were exceptionally lucky. And even then, your life expectancy was what, like 40 to 60 years? So like life was a very precious thing back in those days that like you'd have to try very hard to just stay alive. Whereas nowadays, we almost don't even think about death. Like we think we're almost guaranteed life, and then problems come up, and it's not like we really want the it's not like we really want to commit suicide most times, but it's like the problems are so bad that that seems like the best option.
Well, yeah, when it seems so hard, or that like, even though like there's always opportunities in the future, when it seems like when you imagine it, and that just seems like it's going to be so much work. Like, I get
And
it.
there's been no struggle to
Yeah.
make life happen.
Well,
Like life is effortless, and then problems come up, and then they're like, "Oh, well, forget this life
well,
thing."
I think to your point too, though, like to the point you're making is a good one, which is like we also like I do think some of it is also like how we were raised and the time we were raised, with like these expectations placed on this idea that you could do whatever you wanted, chase your
Hmm.
dream, blah, blah, blah. And then you're constantly compared to others with grades, with all this other stuff. And then with the internet, that got even
Social
worse.
media,
I was
geez,
gonna,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was like, we were lucky, I think, in a way that we missed that in high school and stuff. I couldn't imagine
Hmm.
that now. So you have all this outside influence, and your perception of what success looks like is insane. Because that's the other thing I was thinking. Like, go back before, just before the internet. Doesn't have to be that long ago. Your idea of success was you looked in your community and you saw some people had a slightly nicer car, maybe like it was 10,000 more than, or
Hmm.
the next highest, or a slightly nicer house or whatever. But it was never like their house is 47 million and yours is 200,000. It was
Yeah.
never that division. But I think
Yep.
now all of us all the time see constantly, everybody heard the day of that Elon Musk was now a trillionaire. Like, how the hell can you fucking compete with that? Right?
Yeah.
Nor should you want to, I don't think. But
Hmm.
when it's like that becomes like the measure of success, or like, these guys from Cursor that made the company Cursor, they were what, in their 20s? Now they're billionaires because it just sold for whatever. It's like, if I'm not a billionaire when I'm 20, then I guess I failed, right? It's like that's what it looks like. And it's like, how can you compare
Isn't it
that?
crazy how the standard has gone so much? Because back when we were like in our, I don't know, late teenage or whatever, Zuck became the first like teenage millionaire or whatever.
Yeah, and that was a
And back
huge
then it was
deal.
like if you're not a millionaire, now it's like if you're not a billionaire, you're nothing.
Yeah, it's
Soon it's
insane,
gonna
dude.
be if you're not a trillionaire in your 20s, you're
You're
a
a
freaking
loser.
waste of
You
space.
just
Yeah.
you suck.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Might
but
as
the,
well just, yeah, forget it. It's over.
and I think this is part of our problem. Like, it's like I think about this a lot. Like, if you go back to like the Middle Ages, and this is a weird comparison, but like, if you were like a regular person, you knew of the king or the queen, right?
Hmm.
You knew they had tons of money and stuff. They were a vague thing, but they weren't part of your everyday life. You didn't think about it all the time. And it was also something that was like blood and untouchable, right? That wasn't something you
Hmm.
could aspire to.
Right.
But now it's like they tell everybody you can do whatever you want. You could be a, whatever. And then you see these
And if
point
you're not
zero
that, it's your
zero,
fault.
yeah, exactly. And then you see these 0.0001% chances all the time around you, kind of enforcing that. It's very hard, dude, to not feel like a
That's
failure.
another thing, dude. That's another thing because like they interview these people who have been very successful, and they're like, "Oh, if I can do it, anybody can do it." And like maybe that's true, but maybe it's also survivorship bias. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's lucky. There's no way to tell definitively one way
Well,
or
what's
another.
funny too, and if you look at their stories, it's like there's always cases of luck. It's situational chances, help
Hmm.
from others and stuff that they don't ever credit either usually. And it's
Yeah,
like because all of them want to have these stories of, from their shoots, whatever the phrase is from
yeah.
your,
Because if it's really not based upon luck, just give it all away and do it again. You
yeah,
know?
you should be able to do it, no problem. Like, what's the
Yeah,
difference, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one reason
I
is
think it's a
the
critical reason. Yeah, it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
just because life is so easy nowadays to have life that, it loses its value almost because we value things we pay for and life is just basically given to us. So that's one reason.
Well, actually, can
The
I
other
real
reason,
quick one
mhm,
more?
yeah, yeah,
No, you
yeah.
just hit on it there was that we've also turned everything into monetary value. Everything. Everything we think of, you can put a dollar on, which I get is like easy for transferring between things, but it also strips any other values from life. Like we don't value things for any other reason
Hmm.
besides money. I think that's become a critical problem for us too, because
Hmm.
everything gets tied to it, and then you see all these examples of people that have like all of it, and it's like, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I was looking at Bronnie Ware's Regrets of the Dying, Five Regrets of the Dying again recently. And the fifth one was, or the fourth or fifth one was, I wish I w hadn't have worked so much.
Yeah,
And it applies especially to men, but also to women as well. And I was kind of reflecting on that recently because I was at the office working, and I was talking with somebody like, "What did you do on the weekend?" And they're like, "Oh, I was just doing more work, 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 work." And I was reflecting on that thing, like I wish I hadn't have worked so much, and I was laughing to myself because I was like, "We're literally in the prime of our lives right now,
and that's all we
and
do.
not only are we working during the week, but also at home on the weekend." We're working some more.
Yeah. Well, you see influencers too. Like I know, like I like Alec Hormozy. I think he has some interesting stuff. But I've even seen him say, if you're in your 20s and you're not willing to work like 7 days a week, like, well, you're gonna get left behind or whatever. It's like, well, that's a terribly unhealthy attitude too. Like I get it.
Hmm.
Yeah, you are young at that time. You have the energy. That's awesome. If you
Uh,
want to dedicate yourself to something, it's the right time to do it. Sure.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, I always wondered,
You
like,
only have your 20s once,
yeah, exactly. Well, we only
You
have
can
our life one.
grind
We only
forever.
have our life once, man. That's the
Yeah,
other thing. And I've always
true.
wondered, like, if we were like more socialists or something like that, where we worked less, like, what would come from the creativity of people? Because if people have
Hmm.
free time, they'll just do stuff. And if they're not stressed about money and stuff, they'll do things. And just,
Yeah.
I think it would be very different and interesting. It's like we've given ourselves this work as the meaning of life, but it was meant to
Hmm.
be a means to life, not the
Means to
meaning
life.
of life.
And it's very interesting to see. There's an interview with Alex Hormozy and Tony Robbins, and for as successful as Alex Hormozy is, he's miserable.
Yeah,
He's the biggest success at a young age, and he's miserable.
yeah.
So like just making money doesn't do it. And he's not the only example. Pretty much every example
Well,
of
I think
someone who's made a lot of money is miserable. Yeah.
he even says in that one, I think too, it's like, you hit your goals, like whatever, like 100 million. It's like, then there's another goal of
Hmm.
200 million or a billion or whatever, right? Like it never stops because there's no
Yeah.
end you can always have more than somebody else. And
But it's
so it's
also
like,
like
you're just collecting stuff for no reason. You can't take it with you when you die.
yeah.
You're just wasting your life. Yeah.
But he also
Mhm.
talks like very often about kind of like the best moment in his life financially. And it wasn't when he made $1 million or $10 million or 100 million. It was when he made $100,000, his first $100,000. And he realized, hey, I'm good for like 4 years if I live
I
really
can
cheap.
do this.
And that
Yeah.
was literally, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars. And that was his best
And
moment financially.
the saddest part is he doesn't need to work. He could
Yeah.
stop now and he has more than enough money than he could ever spend. And
Hmm.
yet he keeps working, right? And it's
Yep.
sad. I think we see this all the time because we all get caught up in this cycle and these lies. And I think that's a real reason why suicide is probably so high because
Hmm.
it can feel so hopeless too. It can. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
that feeling when you look at all your debt and stuff and you're just like, oh my God, how can I ever get out of this? And it just seems like there's no path forward because all the stories we hear are like overnight billionaire, overnight this, and
Right.
it's like, well, that didn't
Yeah.
happen to me overnight,
Hmm.
so I must be doing something wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And because, yeah, it's like, I don't know, money just doesn't really equate because it's not something like really tangible, you know? But anyway, so there was the one that I was talking about. The second reason is actually I've been reading these books by Dr. Michael Greger, I believe his name is. One book was
what
called
book?
How Not to Die,
Okay,
another was called How Not to Diet, and another was called How Not to Age. And so he taught in How Not to Die, he talks about the top 15 causes of death in America.
stress.
And oh no,
Uh,
number one is heart disease.
oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
heart disease, many different cancers, stroke, high blood pressure. But on that list is depression.
Yeah,
And that's a major cause. Did you know the number three cause of death in America is actually our healthcare system?
that makes total sense.
Dude, that's so messed up.
It
After
costs
the
a fortune
billions
and
we
it's
spend
terrible.
on
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
It's you, Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. But
God, it's
anyways,
so fucked
so
up.
So there's a whole chapter on depression. And it's really interesting because what he does in this book is he looks at a whole bunch of these meta studies, which are basically like studies of studies where they
Yeah, they
group together
correlate
a whole bunch
data.
of studies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it helps get rid of the outliers. And especially it helps get rid of all these like paid studies that like
Well,
turn out
it's been
for
a
in the
big that's
favor of
been a
whoever
big trend
pays.
in science, right? Because we have all this data sitting around,
Hmm.
but we haven't really had the means to be able to very quickly go through and analyze all this data. And now we do, so
Hmm.
it's been a big boon.
Yeah. And so so the depression chapter, there's a lot of different things in there, but the overarching theme is the lack of nutrition in our diet and the excess of these ultra processed foods. Like these are the two main contributors for depression from what we've seen from studies. So like lack of nutrition is because we're not eating enough fruits, vegetables, nuts,
A
beans,
balanced
grains,
diet.
all of
Yeah,
those
yeah, all this
things.
stuff.
You know,
Yeah.
but like especially whole foods,
Yeah.
not like processed foods. So actually like whole
Yeah.
foods in the form they appear on Earth. So
Not
like
not dried
we're miss
berries in your cereal. Yeah.
well, not even that. Not
Or
colored
marshmallows.
marshmallows in milk like
Yeah.
that, you know? And then the other thing is not ultra processed foods. So like most of these foods, 80% of foods in the supermarket are ultra processed foods, which they're devoid of nutrition. And plus, because of our awesome legal system that we were talking about recently, there's a system called GRAS, GRAS, generally regarded as safe. So any manufacturer can make anything and put anything in food, and under the generally regarded as safe law, it's nobody checks it. So
Yeah, everyone.
essentially, I mean, trans fats was the big one that kind of opened people's eyes because they're like, oh, everybody's dying because of trans fats. That was one out of hundreds of thousands of things in these
Well,
grass
actually,
foods where
yeah,
they just
you hit
put them
on
in there.
something
But
too.
they've caused a lot of mental issues are caused by the things that are
Well,
put in
because we don't
food.
know what it actually does to us long term, right? And every
Yeah.
time they do like, fat free, this and that, they're removing something that gives flavor and they have to replace it with something else.
Hmm.
And
And the
it's like,
cheapest possible thing.
yeah, and that's what happens. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. No, I think that's true. Like we don't eat very well, but food's so easy to get, but we don't like think about it. But then we don't think about what we're eating either, right? So it's like
Hmm.
we're in this very difficult situation, I think that's weird. It's kind of like a very modern problem,
Hmm.
obviously, but like also an interesting one because we also have more time on our hands to think, which is also kind of problematic for depression
Yeah.
and happiness.
Yeah, and
Like,
they've and so like this book has all types of these crazy studies. And like there I remember one that was just kind of like shocking where they did these studies in prisons where they just saw that if instead of feeding them the garbage that they normally feed them, like essentially the stuff that we would get in a lunchroom at school, they started feeding them whole food, the amount of violence in the prison dropped dramatically
because they're all
just from
mad
doing
all the
that.
time.
Yeah, just from doing that. And it's like feed people real food and they're less violent. Feed people real food, they're less depressed. It's just like a mind blowing.
Well, we don't, it's funny, all this stuff progressed so fast. We don't know a lot about the chemicals and stuff that we use because we really don't. We don't have long-term studies. A lot of stuff was invented not that long ago.
Hmm.
You can't have
Yeah,
long-term studies. It's interesting you mentioned that depression in that book though, because I remember during COVID, they did some studies on loneliness and depression because a lot of people were experiencing that obviously when
yeah.
everything was shut down. And they had actually found like there were some long-term studies done even before COVID that loneliness and depression can equate to like smoking a pack a day in terms of your
Hmm.
like as just a comparison in terms of
Yeah.
harm to your life, which I found really interesting because we are
Interestingly
social
enough, so
creatures.
can eating hot dogs.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, well,
Uh,
we're social creatures, right? Like we need that
yeah.
interaction. And I think, but this is the other thing that's really interesting is like we have the appearance of so much ability to interact with others because of the internet, but that's also like diminished our valuable, fulfilling, like enriching interactions
Hmm.
more and more because it's easy to be anonymous, alone, to lie, to curate, all these things instead of actually talking to somebody. And it makes us, I think, less able to interact. So I think that's another factor too that's really contributing to this,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. Yeah, because really, I mean, it's not like you need a whole bunch of relationships. You need like one good friend, and that's really it.
Yeah, but find good friends, but maintaining those relationships is hard, right? Especially when you're distracted and stuff, and like
Tons
it's
of
easy to go
distractions.
online. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then on top of that too, like I think the other side of this too is that when people do get depressed, healthcare is so expensive here, and then mental health
Hmm.
is hard to find and get. I
Yeah,
remember
and stigmatized and all that stuff.
I was reading a report. There's this soldier in Texas. So he's trying to go to the VA to get help. He was depressed, had PTSD, whatever, and he was having suicidal thoughts. So he finally gets an appointment. It's like 2 hours away. He drives there. They go, you're depressed. He's like, yeah. The guy's like, do you have guns at home? He's like, oh yeah, maybe give those to a friend. I'm gonna give you a script for this. He gave him like a script for like freaking like 30 or 60 Xanax and sent him home. Like, so you give the person one something to kill
Dude.
themselves.
Oh,
Like
here's a here's another reason why that I just thought of talking about giving people
medicine.
prescription medications. Yeah. So antidepressants, this is the craziest thing. This is straight out of fe one of the books by uh what is it? Feeling Great, Feeling Good, one of those
Is
books.
that David
But
David Byrne?
yeah, David Byrne. There we
Yeah,
go. Dr.
okay.
David Byrne. Yeah. So antidepressants, not only do they not work against placebos. So not only do they statistically not do much more than placebos, but they also make you 5 times more likely to commit suicide.
There you
Why,
go.
why on earth would we give depressed
Well,
people a medication that makes them 5 times more likely to commit
here's
suicide?
here's another conversation I was having with somebody the other day that I think is important. It was just so the way our culture is, we also don't get time to stop when something's really wrong.
Hmm.
And I think this is another issue, like Kate that, right? Like a lot of those drugs can be they can help people in the very immediate problem right now, like for a
Hmm.
very short term, but you need to make changes to then make it really work. And eventually you
Right.
should get off of them for that reason. They're not going to be
Hmm.
long term. They don't really do a lot, but that placebo effect even can be helpful at the very
Yeah.
beginning.
Hmm.
But people don't have a chance because lives are so busy, everything's so stressed and rushed, and for no reason. That's the other thing.
Hmm.
Like I was reading a report that like a lot of these big companies, most people's work is like busy work.
Oh
It's
yeah,
stuff they just,
definitely.
and it's like, so we,
100%.
but we're constantly pressing, get it done now. And I think this is the other thing. Like, if you're not growing, you're dying in a sense. That's our
Hmm.
mentality. And I think this
Yeah.
is really detrimental to our health and happiness and just mental health in
Well,
general.
I like what you said there with the busy work because I do see there's at the office that I go to, there's a couple of big companies, and it seems like they're giving people stuff to do just so that they're busy the entire 8 hours they're there.
Yeah. But
Not that they're doing anything that's worthwhile for the company. Like I know one big guy there who's doing these spreadsheets and reports all the time that nobody looks at and all this
no,
stuff, and it's just like, but it's his entire week is doing that stuff, and it's just like what's so wrong with having people just come into work and, not add up to the bottom line? But I
and
mean,
where's the
I don't want
meaning
to,
there, right?
I
No,
don't want
but
to blame MBAs for this,
it
but I
is their
do blame
fault.
them for all of world's problems because probably back before Enron and stuff like that, and before
Yeah.
MBAs, people had jobs and they just showed up there, and if there was no work, they just kind of hung
Well,
out there and did whatever until there was work.
here's the other side of that too, is there's no company loyalty anymore. So companies
Hmm.
fire people irrespective of even their performance, doesn't matter. You
Hmm.
know, job pay has not got raised with inflation at all in this country. So things
Hmm.
are harder. People are doing more work with that's less rewarding, means less. I mean, there's so many factors against us, I think, right now. It's kind of insane,
Yeah.
you know? It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
busy work thing's crazy. You look at dude, if you just start talking to people that work in these big companies, you're like, dude, my partner's mom works for a big company, and like she's constantly they're pressuring to get this stuff done, get it done, and then they don't even use the stuff that they make.
Yep.
Like, it's like insane. Yeah.
Everything's an emergency and then it's useless.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of crazy. Oh my
Freaking
God.
crazy. Yeah, so we've gone over a lot of different reasons for suicide. But you know what? Let
And
me
we should
ask
also
you.
say too, real quick, because we should mention it. If you do have a problem, and somebody has a problem, 988 in the US is the number now. They have that 3-digit number. Call it, get help. You should
You could
talk to
also just
somebody.
Google, I'm suicidal, help me. You could
Yeah.
also say anything regarding that you're feeling down to ChatGPT.
Or to a
And
person.
nowadays, yeah,
Yeah.
or to a person. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So those would all be good resources. I got to ask you because you've read a lot of philosophy. Is suicide something that they've always talked about throughout time, or is that more of like a modern problem?
No, it's just
Because I do,
something they talked
I think,
about.
I think like the
Yeah.
existentialists talked about that, but
Oh, absolutely.
I'm
They talk
thinking
about
like
death a
I'm thinking,
lot. Yeah, they talk about suicide a lot because especially like Camus and stuff as an escape or,
yeah.
viewed that way.
But
But
what
no,
about
even if
like
you can,
older stuff like Greek and Roman?
No, you go back to them, you see talks about it because, look,
Yeah.
from an ethical standpoint, there's still the talk of like, is it ever ethically right or justified? That kind of issue, right? But also just like the value of life gets talked about a lot. I mean, you see, just, we've mentioned Marcus Aurelius a lot, right? He talks about death all the time. So that awareness of death also, I think, comes with that awareness of like, you could end your life, but like, we only have this short time. So I think you see a little bit more in the ancients an emphasis on like appreciating the life that we have, rather
Hmm.
than thinking of death in a way that is a motivation or a way to remind yourself that this isn't forever. But we see more like direct suicide talk, I think, a little later on. You see it in
Hmm.
medieval scholars too, especially like you'll see it with like the ethicists, like especially Christian theologians, trying to grapple with these questions of like what's theologically and ethically morally right. So yeah, you do see it come up. But not in the context. I think the existentialists are kind of unique in that respect because like they look at it more
Hmm.
directly from like the human individual experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's one thing I think too, if you look back at the older things though too, is like this idea that like I think one thing we miss is like I don't know, you look at these ancient thinkers and stuff, and it was about you bettering yourself. That like a good life was that, right? It was like trying to constantly better yourself and deal with what life threw at you in a more balanced, healthy way. That was the goal of good life, right? Like flourishing. And
Hmm.
getting good at your job, doing stuff like that, being part of your community, whatever. Um, and I think, we've kind of lost that a bit too, because everything's become about money. And it's become about like, if I get money, somebody else can't have that money. So now it's a big competition. I mean, like, I think about that a lot. We don't have any community anymore. It's like, so I think we feel more isolated. There's more pressures, it's like very hard. It makes sense why
Yeah.
people are doing it more.
Yeah. And okay, so I had this crazy thought this week. Have you heard about like the Blue Zones book, where there are these areas in the world that has like the most centenarians, the most people who live to 100? So there's
Oh,
like
I've heard
Okinawa in
that. Okay,
Japan,
yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, they
and
think a
I
lot
think
of it's
like
diet,
Sicily
right,
and
and stuff or
India or something
whatever.
like that.
And
Yeah, so diet and stuff like that. So there are these blue zones where like yes, the people eat a lot of like the same they eat a lot of like plant-based foods, and
Whole
they
Foods,
they
and
have a
yeah,
community and everything like that. But I was thinking about it, and all of these communities are not diverse at all. There's no diversity whatsoever in any of these communities. And it's just like, maybe that's one thing. We're missing the actual communities that like held us together because we're so focused on diversity that we lose the parts of ourselves that are actually us.
yeah, it's interesting. We're in an interesting. The U.S. is an interesting place, right? Because it's big, and it's got, I was joking with somebody about this actually yesterday at a barbecue, but like, it's huge. You have all these different people with all these different ideologies, beliefs, and what's funny is we all want the same thing. We just don't realize it because we say it in slightly different terms, and then the people in power pit us against each other as a way to distract. It's like, it's like kind of comical if you almost think about it. Because like I think
Hmm.
we could have communities here. We just don't because that individualism always is placed above everything else and that idea of competition. And I think that totally destroys it. Whereas, like, I mean, talking to people, networking, you're always going to find more experiences anyway, which is
Yeah,
really funny. Yeah, it's kind of a weird
definitely.
catch-22.
Yeah. So, anyways, we did it. I think that was a long episode on why
Yeah,
suicide is more popular. I'd
yeah,
like to end it with, I think, a quote from you that I think was best is, you know, you can always end your life. Why now?
yeah,
Which,
right.
which is well put, you
Well,
know?
I thought about that when I was thinking about it before. I was like, but that's so final.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah,
what
because
an
if you think
option.
back, there's been times when you've been up and there's been times when you've been down. And a lot of times when you've been down, like sometimes you thought it was never going to end. And that's the crazy thing about hopelessness is
Yeah.
that when you're hopeless, you think that that feeling is going to last forever. But have you ever had any feeling that lasts forever? No,
No.
it doesn't.
And well,
But it's like one of the biggest lies that your mind makes.
I think to that point too, and one of the things that when I was feeling really down and suicidal, honestly, like a while ago, one of the things that helped me most too was like when I finally did start to make changes, I realized, I don't know why, but I realized it was going to be incremental and slow, but eventually that would exponentially snowball. And it did. But it took years. So I think that's the other problem is like we always expect things to go from terrible to great. And if they don't, we failed, something's wrong. And that's
Mhm.
idiotic. Nothing goes like that. Everything is
Because everything we
stepwise and
see on
slow.
social media is like,
I
oh,
know.
12 days to this, 30 days to that. I
Yeah.
changed my life in 1 week.
And
And it's
I
just like, come on.
like I was thinking about that the other day. I think if you're honestly depressed in the world we live in, like getting out of that totally is possible, but it's going to take you years. But that's okay.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And there'll
Yeah,
be
because
ups and
as long
downs
as you
going that
don't do
way.
anything drastic, you've got your whole life to figure it out.
Yeah. And then you'll find new problems. Don't worry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyways, that's all for this episode. If you did enjoy it, we've got hundreds more episodes wherever you got this one on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Andy.